you doing?
I'm still waking up as well. Well, we're doing a special Facebook Live. It is the Kickstarter launch party for the Four Pillar Society Tarot.
Yay!
Yay.
Yay.
Oh, look at that. That's so cool. So is that the box?
Yeah,
That
that's a
is the
box.
that is the box,
Well, that's our
and
box.
it's
Wow.
Oh,
the
very
final
cool.
box
Awesome.
will probably be a lift off as opposed to
Oh, look up. Yeah.
slide out, only
Yeah.
because it's much more effective for people, and that way the deck's not divided when they first open it.
Yeah.
Does
Oh,
does the
But
book come in it?
no, the
Does it come?
documentation will all be online.
It's so
Oh,
Only
that it's
because I
Oh.
hate this is a pet peeve of mine that comes with most boxes,
yeah.
and that is that most people, they're so small,
Yeah.
and the type of
Oh,
them has to
yeah.
be so small to see them. I'm 60. I don't like looking at print that small
Or you have
anymore.
to make an overlarged box, you know. Oh, wait, before we get
Exactly.
too far, everybody introduce themselves. So I'm Dax.
I'm Mary,
I'm
I'm Gar,
and we
Gary.
have
I'm Nyxsaurius.
Nyxsaurius
Mhm.
Doris,
and Gary
Gary,
or
Gar.
Gar.
Gar,
It's a wild gar.
and and today's a really exciting day because it is the launch day of the Four Pillar Society Tarot Kickstarter.
Yeah, at the
Right?
new moon tonight at
That's why
7:52
we're here.
p.m. PST, we're
Oh,
launching.
Right.
all right.
Awesome.
Mhm.
So tell us more about what it is that you're launching. Where's the title come from? The four pillars, what four pillars? Like any four pillars or your own four pillars or what is a pillar?
Uh,
I
there's
don't know. Like,
oh,
what do you mean?
there's a mythos attached to it.
Mm.
The four pillars at their heart are representation of the four directions, elements, however you want to put it, that kind of cover almost every aspect of our lives. And they're normally seen as the elements: fire, water, air, and earth. In this case, we tied them to the idea of reality for earth, time for cups, fate for air or swords,
Mm.
and for fire, chance. And the whole idea of creativity and fire, of the spark of life, we have represented by
Mm.
a tiger. Like the cups and water, time, we think of a river of time, and so a fish. For
Mm.
spider,
Mm.
for fate, we think of weaving, so spider.
Right.
And then for earth,
Oh.
reality, dragons.
Ooh.
Primordial,
Dragons for
primal.
reality. I love that. So I have to say that, and I'm sure anybody listening in the Tarot Guild Facebook group, they've seen a lot of your posts about the deck, the artwork, and the wonderful artist notes that you write up with it and everything. Um, what really caught my eye because I love tigers is like there's so many tigers, and these kind of representations that you're talking about, the tigers and dragons and stuff, was that something that already existed, or was that something that sort of like that's your whatever your
It's an
idea?
I would say that we were connecting into something that already existed. I mean, even
Mm.
having tigers in a tarot deck is not unique. Look at the Fool in the Thoth deck, and Lady Frida Harris has
Right.
the animal as being a tiger.
I mean, honestly, I would call this a pretty unique take. Not gonna lie.
There's nothing wrong, right? It's like we did this. But why do you like what stands out to you about it when you guys were in the process of making it? Source, what is the what
So
made it special? for you?
I'm a dragonic practitioner, and so a lot of the things that I practice are passed down to me through a lot of intensive training, and as a result, an old dragonic mythos is what stemmed this deck into coming in. These were four guiding forces that drove the dragons into greatness, and because they were fostered by these beings. And the mythos goes, this was a time when energy was just turmoil, and it was nothing had formed. This was before reality had formed. Nothing had even existed. And then eventually, by some whim of their own, energy took a will, and that will took the form of four beings. The first took the form of a dragon, whose belly made the boundaries of all reality could exist in. But it was still framed. So the second form that took was was the fish of time. Now we're not talking like 2 or 3 o'clock time. It's time gave reality motion. It is no longer a still frame picture, but it is now moving. Then came chance, which gave color and life to it. And then finally, fate, which gave purpose or a directive.
Destination or duration.
Wow.
And so, with all four, those created the four fundamental parts of reality.
Well, it's kind of funny, like, so, you know, when you were talking and describing that, like, especially the dragon part, you know, just in my mind, I'm thinking of like Tiamat, you know, that idea of the kind of ancient primordial dragon energy. Is that like, are there any myths that we would connect to this deck with that maybe other people might know of? Or
well, the thing about the four pillars I've learned is that they put fragments in the little places that people don't look. They're older than most of the gods that are out there. So what's the hardest way? What's the best way of making sure that you are working effectively? Well, and that's as if the less people that know about you, but the more people you affect, the more effective you will work. And so the four pillars over time have influenced things from the background and have gone, let me raise this one. How many people actually know the story of who raised the gods or the dragons before the gods that raised them?
Also, in almost every mythos, there's the idea of one being, and then that gives birth like to a primal three, which means four, which makes four. Like you have Odin and his two brothers. You have Zeus, Neptune, and Pluto. And in each case, and they all represent very similar things, so you can tie it in. The four at the beginning almost seems to be a primal notion, where, like, say, let's take for instance Zeus, air, and Neptune, water. Pluto, you can think of fire, the underground, but still the primal fire. And then you have that they all came from their creator, and all were seen from the perspective of Earth
or Gaia.
Yeah. So almost you can tie it into almost any mythos. The whole idea, for me, one of the reasons why I enjoyed working with Nyxsaurius, which is similar to why I enjoyed working with Curtis Joseph on the Black Alchemy deck, was that every generation, the archetypes stay the same, but the way they express changes generation by generation. For us and Dax and Mary and I, we learned from a lot of the original mythologies as we were growing up. the symbolism for Curtis Joseph and everything came from martial arts and came from various spiritual teaching. And for today, Nyxsaurius, a lot of the symbols and the way they express come from and for me, it was also comics, the primal, where you can get a lot of primal mythology. It's amazing the symbolism that comes from that. But in Nyxsaurius' generation, the two biggest influences in the way that the archetypes express most potently is through anime, manga, and gaming. And so each generation brings in the new symbolism, and that's why I've really enjoyed each of my decks coming from a different symbolic basis.
Wow.
I mean,
so
honestly,
how long? Go ahead.
There's one symbol in particular that you can see the evolution of how it's been depicted, and it's a negative decline for how it's been depicted, but it isn't a change in how it's been depicted over generations. Originally, the swastika was originally a sign of peace. It was meant to represent a sign of thriving life. And then after World War II, a lot of people took it as a sign of bigotry and whatnot. Is it wrong or right? That's not my place to say. But the fact is,
over time, meaning.
Yeah.
Archetypes change in their expression over time. And it's funny because in the case of the swastika, you can almost say it switched archetypes.
Yeah.
But either in every case, it was an expression of some archetype, but the archetype of what it was an expression of changed. In a very similar way, dragons have changed over the centuries and millennium. Remember the original maps, any area that was unknown would be marked as here there be dragons.
Dragons there.
Well, you know what's weird is that, like, I had a friend who was a psychic here locally and then like other places and everything, and she was a musician and everything. She passed away like last year or whatever, but she like made this deal with this, like, I think Chinese family in the Ural Mountains for what she called I'm wearing one, like dragon stones.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And thank you. And like, let me choke myself so you can see. But like the other side's different, but and it's like maybe a combination of like agate and I'll think of it, agate and onyx, right? And the thing that's really weird about it is, like, I have this friend and I have this friend in Santa Fe that, like, he's like a big fossil guy. Like, he's going out and like going on digs and everything. He's like kind of a archaeologist, and he has a big shop, and like you wouldn't believe the fossils he has, like full on, raw dinosaurs and or whatever noise dinosaurs make. But he like tested the stone and found some sort of like organic material in it. So like, and the mythology from that particular area in the Ural Mountains, I guess it's really like, here's Russia, here's China, and there's the Ural Mountains, is that the dragons at some point turned to stone. So it's kind of interesting to talk about,
cool.
all these different mythologies. But my goodness, it's endless, especially when you get into dragons. It seems endless, like in every different culture.
As Mary knows, I was born in the year of the dragon, so I'm down for anything dragons.
He's so dragon.
You'll enjoy this deck, especially the Suite of Pentacles. Is almost all dragons of various kinds.
Awesome.
Let me ask you about the Kickstarter again. You said it was the whole idea with the crowdfunding and the raising funds is the initial printing is so expensive and all. And or with whom are you getting the deck printed, and what's the logistics like? What does it cost to print a deck nowadays? That kind of thing.
It costs a lot, and shipping is even more. Like on the Black Alchemy deck, when I was not making any profit at all when I would sell individual decks, because it actually cost almost the whole 96 to print one deck and to ship it out.
Wow.
And I mean, it increased, and I found out at one point I had to raise my prices because I was actually losing money because they raised their prices because of COVID.
Yeah.
Which you
I've
can't
heard that.
really blame them. And so with the crowd, so this is why I wanted to crowdfund this deck. I want as many people as possible to be able to have the opportunity to buy it at an affordable price. And therefore, buying it up front with something like Kickstarter made a lot of sense.
Sure.
And this way, we can keep the prices low and make it not much more expensive than something you can get from US Games or from any of the rip-off people which I guess is quite a big thing on Amazon.
Yeah,
it's a huge thing. Well, what can we tell people right now? Like what time can they go and like help fund the project? What's the
goal?
Anytime after 7:52 tonight.
Pacific.
Yeah, Pacific. So anytime after 10:52 Eastern.
Wow. Okay.
New moon.
And do we have and for the new moon? Oh, can you talk about that? Like why?
That is when the new moon in Cancer is coming. The moon is in its own home in Cancer. Right. I know, Dax, this is astrological stuff, so Cancer would be 4 o'clock on your clock.
Cancer.
Yeah, exactly.
Right at 4 o'clock.
Cancer is ruled by the moon, so it's when the moon enters its own house.
I have a moon.
And also, for people, there's also something that's going on where Jupiter will be square the sun, which means that opening success, but also that you have to work for it. And so I was looking what time, and I was thinking astrologically, should I go with the equinox? And it's always better to start things during the new moon rather than between the full, when the moon is waning.
Right. You want that gain, right?
Exactly. So the idea of gain and the idea of moving forward.
Right. By the way, all this 4 keeps coming up, and the 4 pillars. You even said Cancer is going to be at 4 o'clock on your clock, and just
and it is
structure 4 4 4. And before you guys came in the green room there, before the live here, Mary and I were chatting, and I was shuffling. I was like, I'm going to pull a card to see how the Kickstarter goes. And Mary, you had gotten a card.
I did. I got the shroom card. That's how it's going to go, man. It's going to go like you're on
It's going to be psychedelic, apparently. I don't know. But this is what's funny. Talk about the 4s is I got the Emperor card 4.
Wow, that's very interesting in terms of
Jupiter. Or what?
It's very interesting in terms of Jupiter square the sun, because it has that kind of flow, flowing forward, but also that kind of, it's very solid foundation. And so
foundations,
having that it literally, taking the 2 cards together, talk about having your feet on the ground and head in the clouds.
Yeah.
Right.
And the Kickstarter gives you a structure, and I always take when I do yes no questions, I always take major arcanas as yes to the answer.
Right.
Yeah, that's interesting because there's a yes no spread it's one of the first things that I teach, and that is that you put 5 cards, and it uses reversals, which you guys don't do, which is fair. which is fair enough. But
thank you.
as far as yes or no's, I just put out 5 cards, and if most of them come out upright, 3 or more, it means yes. If most of them come out or 3 or more no, up reverse means no. But then I also use the cards to give more information about the why, yes or no.
Oh,
And
okay.
I'm fine with using reversals or not. I've done it both ways, only because each card holds the reverse energy. The energy is either clear and coming through clearly, or the energies around it are blocking it in some way. The reason why I use reverse cards is it tends to, and it doesn't mean the opposite. It just means, what does this energy mean for me? It just means, what does this energy mean when it's stopped up?
Right. Well, in this deck, and I mean, I think you guys would actually dig this deck. It's the Enchanted Unicorn Oracle, which doesn't sound like anything you would dig, but it's based on the Voynich manuscript. Hello, holler, anybody into the Voynich manuscript?
It's a manuscript that they finally deciphered after godforsaken how long?
It's crazy, right? But the message with the shroom card is to think outside the box. And so do you feel that, I mean, doing a Kickstarter for a deck instead of, like we were talking earlier, just putting one on Etsy or trying to go with a regular publisher, do you think that's thinking outside the box these days? Or do you think that is becoming like kind of a more...
I see more and more people doing it, and some people have been amazingly successful. One deck that has inspired me a lot, and I mentioned this, I think, when I was on with you guys on the radio show, I was still waiting for the deck, was the Alleyman Tarot.
Right.
And that seeing his success with Kickstarter impressed me. It also inspired us to add a little bit extra to this deck. And this will offend tarot purists, but this is a 90 card deck.
90?
Wow.
And of those 90, 7 cards I did 2 different versions of. Actually, I did 2 different versions of about, 15 of them, Sarahs?
Something like that.
And these 7 called out for us to keep them in the deck, and people can either use both cards in a reading, because they will have subtly different meanings in the documentation, or they can choose between them and personalize the deck to themselves. There's also 5 archetype cards. 1 second, because I'm gonna actually show
real
this.
Quick.
I actually did.
The deck you mentioned, is that the one that hit over $1 million?
Yes, it did.
Yeah, I heard about that. I was like, oh my God, $1 million Kickstarter for a tarot deck.
But the funny thing is, his costs were so high in terms of packaging and everything else. And it's beautifully packaged. I mean, it's just a classy thing altogether. Where he had expansion deck cards besides the deck, there's about 120 cards if you get all the 4 different expansions. And it comes in a cigar box, and he also, one of the reasons when it came out, when his Kickstarter even started, we had already started on the 4 Pillars deck, and we already had this mythos of the 4 Pillars in mind. He actually show, like, he has a very strong mythos behind it. Actually, he even did he actually did like a series of 13 podcasts, I think, to support it with the whole mythos of the Alleyman.
Well,
I know it's weird. I'm really pushing his deck. Well, his deck is a very limited one, and he's almost sold all of them, but.
Well, so this launches at 7:52 on the new moon, 7:52 p.m. Pacific time. That's and correct. Goes how long?
For 2 months, 60 days.
Oh wow.
Oh, it's a 60-day one. Okay.
And is there any benefit to getting in early versus later, or? does it matter when people decide to back the campaign? Does like something, like, does it matter? Like if they
We have a couple of tier rewards for those who do help us in the long run. For instance, say there's a certain card that you like in the deck, you can actually have a print that's made made for that card, and you can
8 by 12, and I think later on I'm going to make them bigger, where you can even have them up to anywhere from the 8 by 12 to 2 feet by 3 feet.
That would be so cool. So like, is it going to be like a print, like, just on paper, or is it going to be like cardstock where you could like?
Oh, it will be on paper. It will be like a poster. It will be basically a poster, but but it will be stiffer. Actually, the way I send them out, I laminate them and send them out, so it will be stiff like a card. But it will be from lamination. It will be paper that's laminated.
And who do you think, like people listening to this now or listening later, what kind of tarot people is this deck really speaking to? And you know what I mean by that is like, if they like a certain kind, or they read a certain way, or they're into a certain thing, this is probably for the unicorn crowd.
Well, I would not have gone. I would not say that I tried to be all things to all people, but I think the only people who I don't think will be into it are people who are tarot purists, who want to go with like the Rider-Waite symbolism.
Right.
We tried to stay away from that in a couple of different ways.
Yeah, Gary Clark's not going to be into this one. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Hi, Gary.
Tarot purists will not enjoy this deck so much because I've really tried. We really tried to be innovative with our symbolism, taking the archetype and expressing them in new ways.
New ways, yeah.
Right. And why was that important? Like I know, Gary, you and I have talked a lot about, archetypes and their importance. Nyxsaurius, what about you? What's your feeling about that?
So a big thing that comes to me is I'm a perfectionist. I call myself a healthy perfectionist, because perfection to me is not a goal. It is a fuel. You perfect it and make it something greater than it once was. And that is what a true definition of perfection is you perfect it into a greater form. And so for me, when I walked into this deck, I'm not the biggest advocate of tarot. I'm going to tell you right off the rip.
Oh, shock.
In my opinion, a lot with my research into divination, and I don't mean this to come off as conceited.
Oh, come on, you are.
Okay,
go for it. It's okay. We're all so conceited.
I could look at any divination art and break it down with the flick of my will.
Wow.
And as a result, I've always had a not so great outlook on divination because of the piss poor representation it's had, because of the people not wanting to perfect it.
Okay.
I'm not, in the case of it, I understand there's people who do good representation, but the bad apples are what I saw. And so when I walked into this deck, and Gary got me back into reading tarot again. Originally, I wasn't going to touch tarot again, and I hadn't read it for over 5 years.
And he dragged you back in.
And then he gifted me the Black Alchemy Tarot, and then from there I'm like, okay, so not everything is as bad as I thought it was.
Right.
Well, wait a minute, Mary. Shouldn't we get some clarification here? Like, what is the bad that you're seeing?
What is the
with
bad?
tarot? Yeah, explain all this.
The cards had no life.
They have no soul.
Every artist wants to make a beautiful picture, but they don't want to pour their essence into it. As a practitioner, and a practitioner expands more than magic. It is an artist. It is a writer. It is someone who says, "Hey, once there wasn't a straw hat here. Now there is one." They are creators. Someone who pours their...
No, I was going to say, so you're saying there's too many Hello Kitty decks.
Yes.
Clones, right? Like we call them clones, I guess, right? You know, where they're just like, you know, we'll do all that, but with cats or with, you know, something
and
like that.
People are like, oh, like the Rider Waite symbolism brought something new to the table when it came out. What came after it was people who looked at the symbolism and said, let's just use the symbolism, but not understand why the symbolism is being used or how to push that symbolism to a whole new level. And so one of my rulings was, and a lot of tarot decks had human figures, and I feel, to me it felt like the human figure in a tarot deck, when it was used in that much abundance, tainted it. So I told Gary, limited human aspects in the deck. That was
and
one.
So there's only like 3 or 4 cards that show humans on it.
Interesting.
Like you'll have the eye. You can have like a lot of the cards will have like features of humans, like the eyes or like the hands, but in terms of just a straight up human being on it,
right?
Very much of that, because from there it makes sure that it ensures that the defining aspects of the archetype.
Oh, there we go.
Here we go.
Oh, nice.
That was going to be my next question. Can we share some pictures?
Yeah,
let's see it.
Okay.
Let's see it.
Okay, I'm going to show you, like, for instance, here is one of the versions of the moon, the Crone's moon, I call it. And it's more darker, it's more primal in many ways, and brings up the unconscious, and it shows what can spring up within you, and you have to figure out how your own self, what it's showing you.
Wow.
Mary,
as opposed to what?
Oh, I was just gonna tell Mary, Doug would love this because it has a tiger on it.
Oh, absolutely. And there's many tigers in this deck.
And this card, the other version of the moon, which is also, you're being led by your symbolism, and understand how you're being led by it.
And of course, you see that tiger right there.
Wow.
And it's guiding shadow.
Beautiful. This is just beautiful, you guys.
Thank you so much.
Amazing.
And the big part of it is just looking at how
here's the Tower card.
Oh, that's one of my favorites.
Wow.
The funny thing is,
made of tarot cards all falling down.
Oh,
well, it's a house. I mean, isn't the Tower your house of cards that you built falling apart? I mean, for me, this is something that occurred to me a while ago. This is also, though, this card has a lot of personal significance in that every card in here either comes from a deck that I created or a deck that I used and was meaningful to me over the years. So it's very personal, where you can have the Morgan Greer deck is in there, the Thoth deck is in there, but also the Black Alchemy Tarot, which I did, the Waking Spirals Tarot, which I did, my Rune deck.
There's also one other detail, one small detail that not a lot of people notice. If you look right about in the middle to the left, you'll see that this card itself is in its own card.
Yes.
Oh.
That's really cool. And you know what? Actually, it kind of surprises me, Mary, that no one has ever done that before. You know, made
I don't remember
images, parts of images out of cards. You know, it just makes so much sense.
And of course,
especially for the Tower, because it's the house of, it's our limited understanding of our fate, or where we're going, the lies that we tell ourselves
Right.
illusions that we have that lead to the eventual fall of the tower.
What greater event in mythos? What greater event in mythos actually tells that than the fall of the Tower of Babel?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course,
That's
what does it look like if you look at it from an angle?
And I also
yeah.
love, I also love one thing that always strikes me, and more it keeps occurring to me, it becomes appropriate. Alice at the end of Alice in Wonderland, you're nothing but a deck of cards.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh
As
wow.
far as people and the events in our life and even the people we draw into our lives, representing archetypes that we either need to understand or need to incorporate within us.
So one question I have is how big, because the artwork is so complex, really. How
Detail.
big are the cards? You know, because a lot of times we talk about, you know, the bigger cards for like more complex artwork, so you can really like see it. Like how big are, what's the size on this deck?
The cards are a standard size tarot, which I believe is 2.75 by 4.75.
I've got a big hand, but it sits roughly about yay big. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay, that's a good size.
Yeah.
Awesome.
This would make a really good, like behind me here is Chair Marchetti's wall hangings. I forget what you call them.
He's the man. I think in the tower card here, you'll see a few from his Legacy of the Divine, which I used for quite a while for readings.
That was my go-to deck for over a decade until the new one I got. But I'm saying that, you know, this particular card, this big, I think would be a great wall hanging.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that's why I'm doing the prints, and I'll also have that people can actually not limit it, and any of my artwork they want, I will send to them at a certain tier.
Wow.
A print
so
of it.
Any card, they can pick like any card.
Any card from any of my decks or any of the other artwork that I've seen on I've shown on Facebook.
Why don't you show them the Two of Swords, and because I know that's one of your favorites that you wanted to print.
I was actually showing that a bit earlier. Yeah, that's the one that I'm going to have for myself. Let's see.
Aww. Wow.
Yeah, here's all the tigers with the wands.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
And here we go.
Wow. I love that.
Yeah.
That is amazing. Amazing. So
each of the cards, by the way, also besides, and this it has a help in divination again, or you can totally ignore it. But each card has a title. And in this case, the Two of Swords is held to truth.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask about that, because it's like it has a title and then like kind of an extra.
Oh, that was
like an epigraph.
That was a requirement I had for the deck. Is every card had to have a name and an incantation tied to it.
Okay.
And that will be in the documentation, the incantation.
I was going to say, hold up, incantation So
a mnemonic.
So what are we doing?
A mnemonic. I would say more of a mnemonic than an incantation, but something that will inspire the reader
to
pull out the energy in the card.
Yeah.
And we were talking about the I Ching before we start the live, and it looks like a hexagram right there at the top.
That is exactly what it is. This one is Earth over Heaven, which is the hexagram that I connected with this card.
Okay. Do they all have
because
hexagrams?
Of the three broken lines over the three full.
Not all of them do. Not all of them do.
No, not all of them have a hexagram associated. This is the only one, but I did it only because it fits so nicely and with the idea of the picture.
Okay, so I have a question. Okay, and answer it however you want, but you got a lot of like stuff going on with these cards, and is it just for tarot readings? the intention with this deck?
No. As a Dragonic practitioner, one must understand how to turn any object into a universally applied object. A tarot card is no different. It is a gateway. It can be used as a talisman. It can be used as anything. The aspect of it is you could use that as a scrying mirror if you look into it enough.
Awesome.
Mary's actually doing a whole deck where it's scrying. Aren't you, Mary?
Yes, Dax. Working on it.
Working on it.
Mary, I have a couple of ideas. This is the second deck I've done where the key to it was scryability.
Yeah.
Or one of the emphasis.
And like, you know, I know that there's a whole, you know, like I'm thinking of scrying in terms of like how you scry with a crystal, you know, crystal gazing, I guess you could say. And for me, it was about creating images that are abstract that a person can look at and potentially see other images inside of them. Like you do when you look at
a lightsaber right there. What was that?
Okay.
I got excited for a second.
That was the Ace of Swords.
It looks like a lightsaber to me when I first glanced
at it.
Of course, I'm blind, you know, I have to take my glasses
blue.
off.
I'm blind too. I have to lean real close. Yeah, that's cool.
When I looked at it real fast, I'm like, ooh, a lightsaber. Cool.
He's always thinking lightsabers. You know?
I think in Star Wars, you know, I'm sorry.
Star Wars is one of the most important archetypal movies of all time. It is the hero's journey. Something, you know, Joseph Campbell, who introduced the monomyth to so many people, was staying at George Lucas's place while he was making Star Wars.
Wow.
And the hero's journey is so much a part of what the original Star Wars movie or even the original trilogy is.
Sure. Right. Sure.
So I really, from a tarot point of view, you have to love Star Wars.
Lucas.
That's probably where my connection comes from, or the other direction, maybe. You know, why I'm interested in tarot is because of Star Wars, because Star Wars came first, sort of, for me.
Hey, and I mean, I was 14. I was the perfect age when Star Wars came out. I was 14 years old, and
I was 13.
And I was so you were right there, and so. You know, you go to the theater and you're watching this, and for me, who was a science fiction fan, like the spaceport scene was every spaceport I ever read about.
I love the cantina
story was so
scene.
primal. I sat through it twice in a row, which you could do a lot easier in those days.
Back in those days.
Spellbound. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Awesome. Anything else you guys want everybody to know before we...
So much, but basically that this is a deck that I think that people can grow with. It will help them develop both as readers and spiritually. We went as archetypal as we could. It introduces an archetype. It introduces archetypes, but it also expresses it for people who are familiar with the tarot.
Yeah.
One of my favorite decks in recent years was the Mary L. Tarot. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
Yeah.
But it is as far from the Rider-Waite and the Thoth deck as anything you'll ever see. But she does something unique. She does something truly unique in it and brings out the art. Each one is true to its archetype. That was the key for this deck.
That's wonderful.
Each picture was asked one question before it could even be put into the deck, and does it demand?
Wow.
Each picture, if you look at that card and say, "Are you worth that deck?" That card will kick you in the face and say, "Yes, I am." Damn it.
Whoa.
So
that's wild.
This has been like a 2-year project, I think you said.
We started it 2 years ago, and almost exactly 2 years ago.
Wow.
I'm starting to. I just want to show one of the queens. The queens are some of my favorite cards in the deck.
Wow. That's just gorgeous, Gary. Just a beautiful, beautiful job, like both of you guys. This is so fascinating. And today's the day. Launches
Tonight,
tonight, and then
yep,
60 more days. Get it while it's
exactly.
hot.
Exactly.
Awesome.
Thank you for having us. Thank you for
Aw,
doing the
Oh,
party
this was
thing.
fun.
this is so much fun, and so glad that you and Nyxsaurius could make it today and just share this with everybody. It's so exciting to, be here when, this is the big day for the launch. It's
Yeah, I'm
kind of
so
more
glad we
fun
were able to do
talking
this on
after.
launch day. Launch party on launch
Yeah.
day. We should be doing this for
Yeah.
every deck coming out. I'm just saying.
That would be
No.
very, I mean, that would be very exciting. I know that there's lots of people doing things. A friend of mine is working on she's indigenous and she's working on a indigenous myth deck.
Mm.
Oh, wow.
That's going to be
That would
very,
be
that's
cool.
going to be
In
very
my
exciting.
opinion, I feel like every tarot creator deserves a sending off, regardless of how they send off.
Mm-hmm.
They deserve a send off because making a deck, this deck has tested us in many ways over the last 2 years.
Yeah. I mean, we've done a
Right.
lot of launch parties on Tarot Today Radio over the years, but it was radio, and this is a visual medium, and this is great
Yeah.
to be able to do, video.
Yeah, that's why I really appreciate this. This is fantastic because I was worried about how can you over an audio, how could I show these cards?
Right.
Because
Yeah.
the art has to sell the deck. The mythos
Sure.
helps, but if the art isn't there,
Yeah.
and if
Well,
people
people
can't
want to
see it,
know
they
what,
can relate to it or not.
yeah, what they're looking at. So, but no, well, this is great. And then, this video will be out there forever. You can,
Mm-hmm. And
do
we'll be
whatever you
posting it on the
do.
Tarot Guild website, and
Yeah.
we'll
That's
send it
awesome.
The
out in
YouTube
a
channel,
email
all of
blast
that.
on all the socials. Yep.
Yeah.
We'll get it out
Awesome.
there.
And
So good luck. Good luck with the fundraiser.
Yeah.
And down the road, I actually hope to eventually I hope to create at least a project where we can push the 4 Pillars Tarot with the idea that the Alley Man Tarot started, and actually make it to where artists, even if they're not courageous enough to start their own deck, they could be like, I don't like this archetype. Let me try and add something to this, and they could join in and eventually. Like say you look at the Fool card and you're like, I don't like the fact that the tiger has a bindle stiff. I feel like the pet should be the tiger instead. And someone makes a Fool card like that, and they make like a little booster pack, and they offer it. They could use it to help grow a representation of the archetype.
I'm thinking of all the expansions, like in World of Warcraft, and why have we not done this?
Well, a lot of the spiritual community has always been separated because everyone is usually, I wouldn't say everyone, but I would say a lot of, at least the ritualist side of things, they're usually at each other's throats because someone did something and it's been an immature fight. It's been a long time since the spiritual community has actually been able to gather under one roof and say, we agree on something. As the philosophy goes, herding LHP or left-hand path is like herding cats. They all want to do their own thing.
Oh, I use that all the time. I'm always like, oh my God, it's like
he's always herding cats.
I use that term all the time.
Just because we're individuals.
Mary, you know that. I always go, it's like herding cats with these tarot people. Jeez. But Mary, deck projects where they also have expansions, packs, like World of Warcraft and games and stuff like that.
But
like, why are we not doing that?
What was the first one? It was oh God, what's her name? With the animals that we had on the Tarot Today radio show.
Oh yeah,
that was the first one.
The Wild Unknown Tarot.
No,
Is that? Oh,
no. The Arc Animal Tarot and Oracle deck
ah.
that is like humongous, but like gorgeous. And her name, Bernadette King.
Bernadette King, art by
Ah.
Heidi Sutherland.
Yeah, I'm so sorry, Bernadette. I could not
It's a
remember
tarot
your name.
and an oracle deck.
Yeah, but
$100.
it's like really, it's
And
really
22
cool.
bonus.
And but it was just like, here's the prehistoric animals. Here's the, you know, the babies and the mother's animals or whatever. Yeah, but she kept, that was the first time I ever heard of like doing expansion packs with tarot. And it kind of, it made sense to me because it was a combination tarot and oracle deck. But like, I don't know. I mean, what you guys have done with like 90 cards, you know, it's like
different versions of the same card. That's expansion too. Yeah, and I kind of like that idea.
I'm really
And
cool
like I said, people can use both, or it's kind of like the Magus in the Aleister Crowley deck, which the Thoth deck comes with 3 Magi, which you can choose which one you use, or you can use all 3. Magi, sorry, Magi. But you can choose one that have
and Magi, yeah.
Well, you know, it's also weird too, because when you go back and look at like different historical decks, you know, and you have the Tarots and the Tarochis or whatever, you know, I'm no expert on this, but they're like different numbers of cards. And like once I started looking at that, like some will have 62 cards in them, then I kind of loosened my sort of feeling about how many cards a tarot deck has to have.
I mean, it's only when something is, you know, it's an idea of, that's where things start getting revitalized again. It's when you get it's when things get set in concrete. There has to be 78 cards. This card has to show this. The Queen of Pentacles has to be facing out, you know.
Yeah.
It's just, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that if it works for you.
But to me,
when people make it a hard and fast rule, it's not living for you. It's becomes
I understand that, but I think that it's still 78 cards, because even if you have 5 emperors and 3 tarot cards, it's still tarot card. I mean, a tower card, magician card, you know, emperor. Even if you have 2, 3, 4 versions, it's still the same 78 cards, you know.
And
I still think it works.
and it speaks to the mind. And the bigger part of this project, which obviously will come down the road, is the fact that I want to see about making is pushing the 4 pillars tarot so that the archetypes can evolve with the times as they come.
Yes.
Right.
And so that's why that in a lot of ways, obviously, I'm not going to be able to depict an archetype of a younger generation myself unless I am that generation, because I wasn't influenced the same way they are. But if you give an artist from that generation and say, "Hey, listen, I'll give you a shot to. I want you to take a look at this, and if you don't like any of the cards in it, feel free to make a new image for them, and we'll put we'll throw it in as your own set of your own booster set of saying this is what by this artist. This is his take on it. All the credit still goes to the artist.
Yeah,
we're just helping unite a community that was once scattered with one of the most universal practices that regardless of which practice you have, everyone has touched or known a tarot deck at one point or another.
I believe it.
Or seen it in a movie, or seen it in a book, or read about a tarot in a book, comic.
Oh,
you know,
it's everywhere now, especially
and
now.
so using that concept, you can use a universal concept, something that's accepted by everyone, and say, let's take a younger generation artist and say, I want you to draw me a Fool card. And even if it is completely out of your zone and you don't understand it and you don't get anything from it, people from his generation might though. And And that essence is what unites people under something and makes a deck from a timepiece to a timeless relic.
No, beautifully said. Beautifully said.
Well, thanks guys for hanging out with us.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so
Let's
much.
do it
Thank you so much
again.
for this. And this is exciting. And people go to the website.
It
You'll
is
see
exciting.
it wherever you're watching this podcast. You'll see the link for the Kickstarter.
That's
Come
right.
join us. Come join us after 10, anytime after 7:52 Pacific time tonight, 10:52 Eastern, and you will
Awesome.
see what it has to offer.
Mm-hmm.
Yay.
And I hope to see you guys push as much as you can in your growth. Of course.
Thank you.
May
Thank
the
you.
blessings of energies will be with all of you.
All righty.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.